Buenos días a todos. Oh my. Buenos días a todos. There you go. I was only in the classroom occasionally, but I learned a lesson or two. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marco Davis. I have the honor of being the president and CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And it's my pleasure to invite you all to our 2023 Tech Summit. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Now, CHCI is really best known for our amazing leadership development programs, and in fact, we have many of our leadership program participants here with us today. But in addition to that, we're also proud to serve as a convener. Throughout the year, through a series of different events, we bring together people from the public, the private, and the nonprofit sectors to provide a space where we can learn from each other and discuss some of the most important issues facing the nation and our community, as well as to create a space for networking. This Tech Summit is one of those events. Today, you're going to hear from members of Congress, from corporate executives, from tech experts, from thought leaders about the impact that technology has had not only on our community, but on the nation and arguably on the world as a whole. When we think about tech, some of us just think about the big areas, computers, phones, gadgets, the internet. But as you'll hear today, technology is actually something that impacts all of our daily lives in ways both large and small. I only need to say something like AI or ChatGPT to make you realize that it's really showing up more and more in lots of places. So our hope is that the discussions we have today will help to move the needle in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's finding solutions for how to diversify the tech workforce so that our community can better take advantage of this revolution as it continues, or better explaining how tech can help foster economic empowerment for our communities, or even conversations about how to ensure that virtual spaces are safe for our children. All of those discussions will happen here today. Now, during this morning's plenary, you're going to hear from some industry leaders and some thought leaders who are going to delve into the challenges faced by Latinos in STEM and walk us through some of the successful educational and professional programs that are fostering greater inclusion. We hope you'll stay with us throughout the entirety of today's summit to gain a better understanding of emerging trends, policy issues, and pathways to success in the tech world. And just as a reminder, although we'll be having a lively discussion here today, we're also recording these sessions so that they'll be available for you to share with your colleagues and friends online to let them know all about the fabulous conversations that happen and they can see what they missed out on. Finally, before I turn it over to our plenary MC, Jason Turcios, a public policy fellow himself, I want to express my deep gratitude to all of our sponsors and partners who helped make this summit together, and in particular, our host sponsor, Amazon, for their generous support for this year's Tech Summit, and to help make sure that they're a partner for us, not just here at the summit, but throughout the year. Also, please be sure to follow us and to comment, continue this conversation in the internet itself on social media using the hashtag CHCI Summit. Once again, thanks for joining us today and enjoy the conversations. And now, Jason Turcios.
Good morning. I'm Jason Turcios, CHCI Public Policy Fellow. I'm delighted to be with you today for the Hacking the Pipeline Latinos in STEM session. With Latinos making up 17% of the total workforce in America, yet comprising only 8% of workers in the STEM field, the need for Latinos in STEM has never been greater. As someone who once thought they'd be part of that 8%, it's encouraging to see industry leaders discuss their work in developing professional and educational programs to ensure our community can achieve a career in STEM. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Amazon, TikTok, Toyota, and United Airlines for their generous support of this session. It is now my honor to introduce welcoming remarks from Session Chair, Representatives Andrea Salinas. Representative Salinas was elected in 2022 to represent the people of Oregon's 6th District. She's the proud daughter of a Mexican immigrant, a first-generation American, and dedicated public servant. She serves on the Committee on Agriculture and the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Congresswoman Andrea Salinas.
Well, good morning and thank you. Thank you to CHCI for having me and for hosting this really important discussion about Latino participation in STEM. STEM fields offer exciting, good-paying career opportunities at all levels of educational attainment. But as we know, Latinos are greatly underrepresented in these jobs and in these careers. I was actually talking to Brandon about his aspirations. He's at North Carolina, studying data as well as engineering and political science. Kids today have endless possibilities. And it's why we need to do more to provide tools for young Latinos and other underrepresented groups to get their foot in the door and take full advantage of these exciting opportunities. Today's discussion could not be more timely. In the past 2 years, Congress has enacted major investments in the technologies and industries of the future. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act are all rapidly moving us forward into the next phase of America's innovation economy. However, experts have said we could soon face shortfalls of hundreds of thousands of STEM workers. In order to achieve the ambitious goals that we set for ourselves, we must prepare the next generation of workers. And this proposes a tremendous challenge. But with any challenge comes tremendous opportunity to ensure that a more diverse group of Americans have a real stake in our future STEM economy. Expanding education and workforce training opportunities in skilled technical work is a win-win. But earlier this week, we saw proposals to do just the exact opposite. We can create good-paying, permanent jobs for workers while also meeting our climate goals and propelling our economy into the future. I serve on the House, as was stated, House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, where we have a strong bipartisan tradition of working to broaden participation in these fields. Earlier this year, I successfully advanced an amendment to ensure that as we develop better approaches to STEM education, we're also taking into account whether they are actually effective for all students, including Latinos and other historically underrepresented groups. As we make policy and implement these once-in-a-generation investments, it is critical that we keep pushing to include more inclusive language to ensure that no one gets left behind. It's also essential that we help young Latinos to be able to see themselves in these roles. Representation makes such a difference, and I know that from personal experience. As was stated, as the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, I understand how difficult it can be for first-generation Americans to really dream big and envision themselves growing up to pursue these careers. But back in July, it was truly such an honor. I get chills just thinking about it. I was able to join my Congressional Hispanic Caucus colleagues for a live discussion with astronaut Frank Rubio, a first-generation Salvadoran American, and he spoke to us directly from the International Space Station. I had a smile on my face the entire time we were talking to him. It was just such an inspiration. And I got to ask Rubio about how his background informs and enriches his research aboard the ISS. And what he said back to us was, it makes a difference. It really does. He takes all of his experiences up there with him into space. And so his research really does, and his background does inform his work. So it was truly inspiring, and I know that the more we expose young Latinos to people like Frank Rubio in these amazing STEM careers, the more they will see that these opportunities are within your reach. So once again, thank you for hosting this critical conversation, and whether you grow up in a rural town or an immigrant family, you deserve to have the resources that you really need to follow your dreams and compete for good jobs in the STEM economy of the future. Together with my Congressional Hispanic Caucus colleagues, I will keep fighting to ensure Latinos across the country can take advantage of these incredible STEM opportunities before us. Again, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Andrea Salinas. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Iris Castro. Iris is a senior content producer with Telemundo. She is a journalist and producer and has won multiple Emmy Awards. Iris previously hosted Noticia Telemundo's tech and social media segment, ##, focusing on the work of Latin entrepreneurs. Please help me welcome Iris Castro.
Thank you, Jason, for the introduction. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for waking up early to be here today. I'm hoping this is a conversation that opens the possibilities and the opportunities for all of us. I want to thank the panel for being here, and I'm delighted to be hosting and moderating this session. As we all know, there are not enough Latinos in STEM. That's a fact. And I want to take this opportunity to go deep into the source, to know not only the challenges and the obstacles that we face, but also the opportunities out there. What programs do we have that foster inclusion, the role of allies and mentors? And I am very happy to have you here because I have 4 experts on the topic, and I want you to help me welcome them. First, Francis Colon, Senior Director for International Climate Policy at the Center for American Progress. Thank you. Angel Enriquez, Director of DEI for Amazon. Alex Purcell, Director of HR Digital Technology for United Airlines. And L'Oreal Vasquez, Director of HR Digital Technology for United Airlines. I'm sorry, and Group Manager for HR Technology and Transformation for Toyota. There we go. I want to remind you that you can send your questions. We have a conference app. You can download it and post your questions there. And we take a Q&A at the end of the session. So please join us in the conversation. Okay, I think we are ready to start. I want to go back to the beginning. We heard when Jason did the introduction that only 8% of Latinos are working on the STEM field. Why is this? What are the cracks on the pipeline? Is it opportunity? Is it education? Bias in the system? All of the above. Francis, I want to start with you and your experience. What do you think are the root causes of this issue?
I think all the ones you mentioned are certainly part of it. I think it's hard to see yourself doing something where most of the representation doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you. And so that's definitely a barrier. There's costs to education in these fields that sometimes result in a heavy load of debt at the end of a academic career in one of these fields. And I know there's been recent policy to help with student loan debt, but all those things add up, right? I think the system also isn't structured for wraparound services. We say, let's get as many of these minds as possible into these fields. So we support them in getting accepted into a program. And then the support goes away. And once you enter into a very difficult academic program, what is there in the system to support you through that period and to help you get the internship and to help you be successful in all the steps of the way? And so I think it's definitely many of the steps in the process that are contributors, are barriers, and we've made some progress, but to be honest, we still have tremendous work to do, and we have not overcome a lot of them.
Absolutely. Please feel free to join. I know that I've been directing the question, but just feel free to jump in. One thing that you mentioned and that I think is tremendously important is education. I feel that sometimes we get the talent after they graduate, after they are working in STEM, or they're trying to change career. But how do we help Latinos get earlier in the game? How do we go to schools? How do we go outside of the usual suspects and get them into the field? Alex, if you want to.
Yeah, it's so vital, in my opinion, to bring awareness to the various careers in STEM as early as possible. You know, there's a ton of opportunity out there. I'll give you an example of something that we're doing at United. So there's a high school in Chicago. They're actually in Pilsen. Pilsen is a largely, predominantly a Hispanic-based community. And so what Crystal Ray does, and it's a fabulous model, and so essentially it's a private high school, and the target population that they have is families that are below poverty. And essentially, they bring on these families and they provide them an excellent education. And the way that they actually pay for it, it's a program called a work-study program. So essentially they partner with companies, and this is what we're planning to do with Crystal Ray. And essentially the students actually work at a company 1 day a week, and that's how they actually pay for their high school. And it's an incredible program, first that I've heard of it. And so there's several advantages in that. Number one, if you're in high school and you're actually getting work experience, you're learning about the various fields in STEM. Number two, there's a benefit with the company to learn and really share knowledge to the earlier generations. There's other things that we're actually going to be doing with Crystal Ray. Number two is we're actually planning to bring some groups of Crystal Ray students over to United, give them a various, like an operational type of job shadow. Maybe they can see our NOC. Again, expanding their knowledge in terms of the different opportunities that we have at United. And then number three, I should say, what we're planning to do is actually go there and share the different opportunities and careers that we have at United. So bringing on a pilot, maybe some mechanics, people in technology, software engineers, PMs, maybe even HR, if they, but various careers so they can actually, so we can plant those seeds early in their career so they can understand what the potential opportunity is out there.
Absolutely. Inju?
I'd love to build on that because I think that you called out some really critical pieces, and certainly Representative Salinas did as well. I think that for me, the biggest thing that is important to us is make sure that we're clearly understanding what gaps we're trying to intervene in when we build programs. So we base a lot of our work in the research done by the Capeware Center around the leaky tech pipeline. And all the things we're talking about are important, but they have to tie together. Right? So like, I love what you said about not just exploring, but also having the hands-on application, because that's one of the barriers and gaps. At Amazon, we've got some big scalable programs. Our biggest one is probably Amazon Future Engineer, which ties students to practical application of STEM or computer science. Last year, we reached 1.9 million students in the United States and 3.2 million globally. But that we know that that's not enough. So we have to couple that with things like our scholarship program that gives you an automatic internship. So that barrier you talked to about like how do you get the internship? For those high school students, we have 400 scholarships that we grant. And then we look at other micro experiments. So locally, here in the DMV region, we have an experiment with a program that Devices runs called Amazon Next, which is about partnering with universities to say, let's partner with you and with our affinity groups to understand what are those things that are the gaps that will help the most. So whether it is a stipend, so students don't need to make trade-off decisions between working in the cafeteria and taking a tech internship, or whether it is ensuring that our courses actually earn you credits so that you don't have to make that trade-off decision around graduation, or the mentorship. All of those pieces really focus on tying specific gaps, or calling on our affinity group members to come in and mentor, and our executives to talk about what we're doing. And then I think the final thing is that we don't always connect STEM to what is important to the students that are coming up. You know, so we don't always articulate that there is an incredible intersection between your passion for doing good in the world, which is a very important part of this generation, and the technology opportunities. So as we think about people who drop out because they want to be more purpose-driven or help people, HR is tech, fashion is tech, you know, climate change is tech. So there's just so many ways that we can think about surrounding this gap and using some of the information that research centers provide to strategically intervene. So I love that example that you gave because that's a really great example of it.
Yeah, I love what you said, that STEM is in everything, because sometimes we think like, oh, technology and like science and math, but it's part of all businesses, and it's paramount importance that we understand and that we promote how it is. And that brings me to the question of how do we make sure that the employers and partners are actually promoting the right way, what STEM is and how to get people to understand, and not only being the acronym of science and math, but really bring them into the conversation. Any of you wanted to, Lawyer, want to give you a few opportunities out there?
Happy to. I think it's a great question. We look at our employee value proposition and we try to talk about, the benefits of having a career at Toyota and what you can do with it. I think the comment around, technology being in the business, that's very, very true. And we're seeing that with AI and machine learning and low-based code. So configuration out of the box, it's opening opportunities for anyone on the business side to be able to get into STEM where you're not a hardcore programmer. I went back to school and I took classes in Python and really tried to get deeper into some of the programming languages. And my degree is in communications. I kind of got into tech in a non-traditional way, and I was a business person that actually was able to understand it. And so I think that that's going to be more and more common, especially with groups that may not feel always confident to go into a hard degree or a programming language that looks difficult. Once you start to get your foot in the door and get some experience, you start to see that there's all kinds of programs, whether it's Salesforce or AWS. There's lots of different low code and configuration programs out there, and it makes a lot more opportunities for individuals to get into STEM, both on the business side and then on IT as well.
Absolutely, I thank you for saying that, because I feel that we need to deepen the conversation and understand that there's a big, big world for people that are interested on working on STEM. And I also wanted to talk about how do we create a pathway after we hire the talent? Because as you were saying, sometimes we have them, they're excited, they're getting the first job or the first internship, but once they're there, I feel that sometimes it gets stuck. How do we make sure that we have the pathway for people to develop and flourish in their roles?
I mean, I think that I'm looking around to make sure I'm not taking up all the space. But I think that it's really important that employers use data to understand the experience that employees are having in their environment. So, and I think at Amazon we talk about like good intentions matter, but mechanisms work. And so we build community through our affinity groups. We have 90,000 employees on our 13 affinity groups that are an incredible gateway into the employee experience, that we have to make sure that we have the right mechanisms to listen. And then we also need to look at, what's happening. In 2021, we talked about a goal to look at our processes to understand how folks are experiencing. And we need to have rigor and hold ourselves accountable to that. And so as we look at that, we have the opportunity to leverage the vast pool of data that we have, the anecdotes that we hear, to say, well, how do we do better, right? Like, what are the things that we can do? And how do we ensure that the ecosystem creates a space where everyone thrives? And then connect people to those opportunities in real tangible ways and why it matters, right? So I think that those are some of the ways that we have to continue to reinforce both that this is somewhere that we want every Amazonian to thrive, and that we help them understand how what you bring to the table actually adds that unique value proposition versus as a deterrent. And then hold ourselves accountable to that. And I think that that's the kind of flywheel that then regenerates, because we can talk to each other and mentor each other and work through. So that's how we approach it. Just given our size, it's incredibly important to have some of those mechanisms in place.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add on that. So at Toyota, one of the things that we're looking at is team member skill sets. And we know that technology is rapidly changing. And so in order for us to keep up with it, we need to look at our team member skills and look at how we can upskill team members in real time. So we've invested a lot in our own internal technology, specifically in HR, so that we can look at adjacent skills. And so if you have a background in project management, for example, you most likely will do really well as a Scrum Master. And there's positions where throughout the company we might need more PMs or Scrum Masters, and starting to get into like product development. So we're seeing that there's a career path for team members based off of those skills that are adjacent skills. And what we're doing is we're opening up gigs within the organization so that team members can see, I have this skill set, here's gigs that my skill set matches. Or if I don't have the skill set, but I'm interested in that gig, how can I close that gap so I can upskill? And so we've partnered with Coursera also Udemy and a few other learning path providers, so that team members can take courses, get certifications, and then that way close that gap, and then team members are more likely to be able to go ahead and move into a gig. I do think, being able to take courses through, whether it's through Amazon or Salesforce with Trailhead, there's so many opportunities versus having to go into big debt anymore in terms of college degrees and programs. So I always highly encourage team members, look at certifications and actual programming languages and courses that can help you in terms of the gig or position that you want. You don't have to go through a long-term degree as well. There's other opportunities out there in addition to the traditional school.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. We're doing very similar things. In my perspective, getting someone a job isn't good enough. It's a career. And the way that we work is we look at what's not the next step, what's 2 steps into their progression, and work through the skills backwards. And so essentially, one of the organizations that we are partnering with is Pluralsight. They're very similar to like a Coursera, but essentially they're partnering with us to create career models and like where could you lateral, like career progression, what are the skills that you need for this versus that. Because getting a job isn't good enough. It's a career at United, or it's a career at an organization, and it's really seeing what I need to do to progress in my career, and what are the skills of the future, what are the skills now, what are the things I need to work on. There's continuous improvement, and looking at how we continue to improve on that. Because sometimes it's skills, sometimes it's leaders, sometimes it's the culture that we support. And so one of the things we also focus on is wraparound support. And so that includes making sure that they have a mentor, that we check in with them monthly. We also check in with their leaders every other month. We send them surveys every other week, see how they're doing, because we want to make sure that they can be their best, not in their job, but they feel like it's a career over time. And so I definitely echo, building skills, and the intent of it is not just that job, it's how do we make a career of it.
Awesome, yes. You wanted to mention something, France.
I just wanted to emphasize that when we think about tech, we might think of big tech, we might think of companies where tech is the focus. But being involved in a tech career or having a tech focus to your future plans can take many forms. So just to give an example, I'm really passionate about climate change, is what I spend most of my energy on right now. And if you think of the climate change space, we need technology solutions to help us with the grand challenge that is reducing our fossil fuel use and transitioning to renewable energy. How do we do that? That takes clean energy, clean technology, right? Developing solar projects and offshore wind projects, and direct air capture in the future that gets optimized. So we need all that tech. We also need the people that understand that and make policy to accelerate that. So that's another way that you are involved with tech in a career, right? You could be a thought leader in the space of crafting public policy that gets us to those goals faster. You can be a representative in Congress that helps us move these things across the finish line and turns them into the law of the land so that the technology can help us get the solutions and get to our goals faster, right? So I want us to think about tech as one of the tools that helps us get to where we want to go and can be part of it, and you can reach it from many different angles. Use it from many different angles, and be involved in the field of tech from many different angles, and that your career options in tech are endless, if you really think about it.
Yes, I think that's a great point, because as you all mentioned, the possibilities are endless. And I like, Alex, what you said about having the right mentor, having the right ally. I think that's very important. For most of us, when we started our careers, we always look for somebody to give us advice, or to, we see somebody's like, okay, I want to go that path. And sometimes, and this is from experience, you feel that there is not an easy way to reach out to maybe somebody in a higher position, or somebody you feel like, how can I talk to this person, even though you want to learn. So I wanted to ask you if you can share, as you have, Alex, what are you doing within the companies to make sure that we have the right allyship? How do we bring people not only within the Latino community, but also outside, and make it an effective ally?
Yeah, so allyship is so critical, and I think there's things that we built a program, and essentially the model of the program was we wanted to focus on underrepresented talent, and the way that we actually did that was we actually built a committee of allies. And we said, hey, we're going to be building a program, and they're going to be providing different opportunities for the people that enter into this program. If you sign up to be an ally, there's a ton of benefits. Number one, you're helping progress underrepresented talent within United. Number two, you actually get some benefits of the program because you can partake of it. And this was 2 years ago, and that program specifically has been an entire huge success because there was such value of seeing people and seeing the fruits of their labor into a program that actually is so important to our leadership all the way up to the top. And so I think allyship is critical. I also think sponsorship is important. If I think about my roles and the different opportunities that I've had, it's someone vouching for me and saying, Al, in the back room, right? Mm-hmm. Like, somewhere they're going, I think Alex can do this. Well, I think he can do this. Mm-hmm. And that's a large portion of how people get promoted and kind of move in their career. And so it's important to get an ally, it's important to get a mentor, but it's so vital to get a sponsor. And so sometimes you actually have to acknowledge and kind of share that and say like, hey, and I actually recently did this with my sponsor. I think you're my sponsor. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, great. Because a lot of those opportunities, again, it's mentorship I see as more, hey, this is how I'm doing. This is the challenges that I'm kind of facing. Let's talk through that. Mm-hmm. Sponsorship is someone that goes, this person is good. I recommend them for this role or for this opportunity. And so allyship's important, mentorship, but also sponsorship is such a critical aspect as well.
Absolutely.
If I can build on that a little bit, I think that what you touched on was really important, because the way I see allyship is that you have different levels of obligation depending on where you sit in a position of power as an ally, right? Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes I talk to, like, if you and I are peers, as an ally, I should support you and make sure that I stand up for you, et cetera. If I'm your supervisor, I have a different responsibility. As executives, you have allyship at a system level responsibility. So as you start thinking about, like, my role is, that's where the sponsorship really shows up, because access to decision-making spaces that really have an influence on careers, both systemically and individually. And so when we look at allyship and we talk about the importance of that, I think it's also really important to ask ourselves organizationally, how do we equip people to be better allies? And oftentimes it's a little bit loose. So the specificity of sponsorship is a really important element. But also other things, like, are you an executive sponsor and ally for this emerging talent program in STEM? Are you a sponsor of the affinity group? What do you, those kinds of things that become, very, very tangible ways to add to amplify the group strategically. And so just there's a lot in there that I think is an opportunity to make change. Absolutely,
yes. And I want to also bring the focus onto the work of Latinas specifically. We mentioned that 8% of the STEM workforce are Latinos, but only 3% are Latinas. And based on the latest poll by Pew Research Center, they said that in the past 10 years, the number of Latinas with a graduate degree has gone to 291% in the last 10 years. That's like a lot of talent. We have the talent, but we also have the challenges that Latinas face. And we talk about inclusion, we talk about representation. How can we make sure that we elevate the word of women in technology? What are we doing in that field?
So I'll start. I think that it's an interesting topic because I think the barriers that prevent Latinos to join tech is very similar for females. I do think that there's even more barriers for women in general. And that's one because of the role that women often take, whether that's being a wife or a mother. It's also kind of how you see your life growing up. So it depends on the household that you grew up in, but I do think that it's common for households that are Hispanic or Latino that women are the cooks and the cleaners and that help with the children. And so I think that that state of mind sometimes sets a culture for Latinas that, STEM is very male, it's very mathematical, it's something that you're not good in, and we know that's not true. So when we break down the data, we see that women do perform very well in mathematics, especially advanced mathematics, but they're often not encouraged to go that direction or that route, and it needs to start very early. So one of the things that we're doing at Toyota is we're investing in education in the US. We've donated over $110 million into those school systems to really focus on STEM as early as pre-K. And we feel that the more that you can see women in STEM, the more likely young girls can then have aspirations and dreams of becoming a tech leader. For me, I'm 7th generation Arizonan. So my family lived in Arizona when it was Mexico. Obviously, I look very different, right, in terms of being Hispanic. But at Toyota, one of the things that I try to do is really mentor other Latinas that either are interested in going into STEM, or I can see that they have a skill set that maybe they don't realize they could go into STEM. So I've tried to seek out women at Toyota that I see potential in, and whether that's through sponsorship or mentorship. I do think we all have some responsibility as leaders. I think, when you talk about if you're an executive, what that role is as well. So something also just to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If I can build on that, I think that we have to be customer obsessed to understand Latinas as a diverse community, right? I am Latina, and I'm not always seen, I'm racially ambiguous as somehow people look at me. But I think that as we look at what it means to thrive, right? What it means to break through some of the conditioning that we have internalized through society, right? And both hold the systems accountable, but give ourselves the opportunity to really thrive in a way that is authentic to ourselves. And candidly, things like this, like where we can come together in community, where we can celebrate, where we can learn together, and think about things like culturally competent coaching that helps me recognize that my personal and my professional are they're intertwined. Like that, who I am as a person is not going to change walking in the door. So one thing that we launched actually as inaugural summit for Black executives in 2022 was what we called the Shine Summit, like bringing greatness into light. And it was bringing these senior women together who had never been in a room of that many senior women of their same demographic to celebrate themselves, to have community, and to learn. And so we'll be doing a Latina Shine Summit in next year as well as we take those lessons. And there's also an intersectionality between those communities, and so some folks will have gone it too. But when we talked about, and I remember pitching the working backwards document for this, I talked about how important celebration was in that conversation, and that was part of our community's way of authentically being ourselves, how important community and cultural competence was in those sessions. So I think that that's something that we can do better at, and I think we as a tech industry can do better as we think about being customer obsessed for Latinas as a highly educated group, as a group with incredible potential in every part of our business.
Absolutely. I love what you mentioned about the community, because I feel that Latinos are very much about la familia and la cultura, and everything that we do is very, I saw like visual, like we look out for people, we see the representation, we share, we like the hugging, the sharing of the opportunities as well. And it's paramount that we develop strategies within our businesses to have people together, to bring them into the community. Something else I wanted to touch upon, and you mentioned technology, and for me, it's one of the things that I know that now we are hearing a lot more about AI. We are seeing how this new technology is going to change the workforce hopefully for the better. And I'm interested in understanding and getting your opinion on how do we think we can use this new technology to bring more Latinos into the STEM field?
So the AI breakthroughs that have been in the news have been in the works for a long time, right? This isn't exactly new, but the way in which ChatGPT broke through and started getting used really created an awareness in the community and the public that there was this new technology that was really gonna speed up certain things. And so I wanna say that AI has the potential to provide us with a lot of breakthroughs and a lot of very good things. For example, innovations in medicine and cures. One of the things that it does, because it processes so much information so fast, it allows us to test things really fast and get to conclusions of what works and what doesn't. For example, testing a material or a chemical product to see if it has an effect in attacking cancer. Let's use that as an example. So getting to cures faster is a very good, light at the end of this AI tunnel that we should look forward to. Enhancing our processes for care. But it also has really made us aware about the fact that it can be, in the way that it is used and been programmed, it can have some biases that are inherent to it, like every technology that we have been exposed to, and we know what the last few years look like. And so we have to be aware of the potential for it to be used in ways that may not be as positive for our communities, for our families. And so I think that it holds a lot of potential. It has a lot of risk. But the idea that this is going to definitely transform how a lot of processes, how a lot of information gets out there is definitely true. And how we ensure that these systems hold more promise than risk, how we hold these systems accountable, how we hold tech companies accountable in what they're putting out there is, I think, one of the places where opportunity lies for our community. There's going to be a lot of opportunity opening up, working on AI through tech companies, in government, in many, many ways. And it's a place to maybe see how we can start getting prepared and getting involved. There's the promise of jobs. There's a promise of contributing through tech, through AI, to what I mentioned, the promise of innovation, of medical advances, of many things. There's also ways in which we get involved to protect our communities and making sure that the systems hold the integrity and the accountability that we want them to have. So I think this is a particular space where we come in understanding how these technologies affect our communities. Our community has been very much impacted by disinformation in the last few years, and we've all lived it in some way or another. How do we get involved to make sure that these promises of technology have the right positive impact in our community? How do we make sure we hold the systems accountable so that our community is impacted in the most positive way and we can avert the more negative risk? And I think that Latinos are uniquely placed to understand what those are. They are eager to get involved in this economy, in this tech economy of the future. So I think it holds a lot of promise, but I think we have a really important role to play.
Absolutely. I think that what you mentioned about accountability is paramount, not only to hold accountable our leaders and the representatives and people in position of powers, but ourselves. We set up that, this whatever act or this law is going to make something. How do we are accountable that we are getting to there and addressing the bias that might be in the system? I also wanted to ask, in general, because I was here and Astoria was mentioning that she has a background in communication, but she just learned coding and she, understood a little bit more about the field. What's the advice that you will give to somebody that wants to take the leap into STEM, that probably has a different upbringing, has a different background, but likes coding or is interested in learning about AI and wants to see if there is a place for them into the field?
Yeah, I mean, from my personal perspective, I constantly tell people to do it. I'm like, there's no downside, because even if you try it out and you decide that you don't like it, you've learned a new skill set, new knowledge, you've met new people, and you have more in your network. So of course, I'm gonna say, go ahead and do it. Also, I don't think that we should hold ourselves back in terms of future opportunities. There's going to be so much in the tech space. Again, the business is becoming tech, tech is becoming the business, that there's gonna be future careers that don't exist today that will exist in the future. So you wanna jump in now, and right now is the best time to do it because it's, again, out-of-the-box configuration. It's easy to learn this type of coding compared to more traditional degrees. And I'm super excited about AI and where they're going. I feel like for the Latino community, it's gonna give us a lot of opportunities to get into STEM. Also, the more that we get involved in STEM, the more we can code and put information into the system so that the systems are less likely to be as biased against Latinos, as well as we know that you have more diverse candidates that are in the field. You're gonna have better outcomes, you're gonna be more strategic, you're gonna perform better. So I just think it's super exciting. I do think you can talk to individuals that have done the role and are in current IT roles and get a little bit more about their background. But just get your foot wet. Like start to go slow, do a course, whether it's through Coursera or Amazon or Salesforce. Those industries are easy to access in terms of the knowledge, and then you can go from there. I would always advise people to look at certification programs, especially the programs that are 6 to 8 months. I constantly am getting recertified on different technologies. I'm on the board for Texas A&M for digital marketing. I just finished my certification. And I think that learning is not, you make it, you're an executive, you're making a good living, you're done. You're constantly having to reassess your credentials and take courses to stay in the game because it's moving so quickly.
Absolutely. I think that, as you mentioned, there are things that probably we don't have now. And it kind of like levels the field for everybody because you feel that you are like on the top of the game and you know everything there is to know about. And then a new language comes around and you're like, okay, this college kid or high school knows even more than I know. So definitely taking on the opportunity to continue to learn and to reach out and seek the opportunities. And I want to ask also a more personal question to all of you. And I want to bring you back and think on when you were trying to get that job. We know that we are like in the level of developing a career, but when you were trying to get the foot on the door, what were the obstacles that you found? What was the thing that you say, I wish I could have this opportunity. I wish this tool was available. And is that still a problem today? Who wants to start? There you go, Alex.
Yeah. So I will acknowledge that the bias is everywhere, and sometimes we even bias ourselves, or there's some things that we have ingrained in us. For example, our cultural background, right? I've always learned, this is a personal, like, be humble. When someone asks you if you did something, say we did it. Like those are things that like I've learned to be more collective, less individualistic, less I, more we. And so when I interviewed for roles, I said, oh, we did it, or I was part of the team, or like those are things that I gave examples for, and they're the interviewers are going, oh, he wasn't the leader of this, he didn't do this, he was part of the team, he didn't take initiative. Like those are the notes that they're taking, and that's the assessment they're making. But there's some bias there. There's like cultural bias that I have, and so sometimes it's just an acknowledgement that sometimes we have these things that we need to just kind of get over and use I and show how we led things, and so that's one of the realizations that I had, and I see that every day because I'm part of the interviews, and I see women, Hispanic women that are doing this that I've worked with I'm like, they're gonna slam it, they're gonna do great on this interview, and then I interview them and they're like, oh, no, they used we, they did exactly what. So we actually rolled out a interview workshop at United through one of our BRGs, Unite, and essentially it showed some best practices as you're interviewing and some biases that you potentially would have as you go into the interview. And so something as simple as that will kind of help people acknowledge their own, cultural biases that they might have and bring to an interview, and hopefully show them their true selves during that interview.
Yes.
I think building on that a little bit, when you talk about 8% Latinos in tech, and you think about what does that mean for the networks that I have available to me to help me build the bridge to understand how I fit into that company. Very often, there's an underrepresentation. So many of us don't have people that work at those companies that can help us kind of guide through, how do I think about the interview? What's valued there? And so I think for me, that was something that was a barrier that was overcome by somebody that I'd worked with in the past, right? And I often ask myself, would they have ever hired me if I didn't have somebody to give me the context? And the answer might be no, right? Because I probably would have approached it very differently. And I do think that remains a barrier, right, as you look at representation. And so what I've coached my daughters who are now entering the field is, build a network, and don't build it just when you need it. Like, start thinking about the things you're curious about. Go on LinkedIn and see who's working in them. Use common connection points to say, like, hey, I noticed she goes to Howard, or went to Howard. So I noticed we both went to Howard. I'd love to talk to you about, what's happening in your company. And so and I think that oftentimes we culturally work under the work hard, put your head down, and you'll get noticed. That is not the reality. And so, and you need people in your network to help lift you when you're not sure of yourself, inclusive of preparing for interviews. So exactly what you said, and what I've experienced is you need those cultural translators for you in the terms of the company culture. And so that would be a barrier I think does still exist, and I would strongly recommend you cultivate that network through different companies and build those conversations in advance of when you need them, so you can tap on them and bring them, and when it's time for you to get that role. Or build your resume.
Yeah.
And I'll add on that. Yeah. I've been at Toyota for 19 years, so I grew up at Toyota. And we have a philosophy, we call it the 3 E's. And so it's your education, your experience, and your exposure. And that's what we say is our secret sauce to making sure that you can advance, whether that's through lateral moves or promotional opportunities. And when I first started at Toyota, I worked hard. I mean, I was putting in hours. I was making sure that I hit my deadlines. I was making sure that I was the expert in the room for whatever position that I was in. And it wasn't happening. And I wasn't getting promoted, and I wasn't getting the opportunities. And I couldn't understand why. And it really was around some of the exposure opportunities, because I was keeping my head down. And I was celebrating my success of hitting the deliverable and the date, but I wasn't celebrating it outwards with everyone else, right? It was more of that internal celebration. And so we really talk about making sure that you have a board of directors, a group of individuals that are trusted, that you can go to and share with them some of your accomplishments, and then they can help you with some of the sponsorship as well as some of the mentorship. I think, if you can focus on those 3 E's in any career that you're in, it's going to help you, because you have to set yourself apart from your peers. And when you look around, a lot of people work hard, right? A lot of people are smart, and you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you do have to be able to step up and be reliable and help others. And I think that if you're that kind of person, it's more likely going to happen that you get an opportunity. The other thing I would say too is be open to doing different rotational opportunities. You don't have to just have one path where it's a step approach. Sometimes you have to do multiple roles. At Toyota, I've had 14 positions in my 19 years. And there were many of the positions when they asked, hey, would you be interested, for example, to go to HR and own IT? I was like, I'm not an HR person. I don't want that. But I didn't say that, right? So I thought it was one of those silent voices. What I decided to do is say yes and see what opportunities it would bring. So I constantly am trying to fight that inner critic that says, no, don't do that. You're comfortable in this space. And it's worked out really well for me. And so I feel like if others are more open to doing rotations, that it can grow into a bigger and better career, as well as potential opportunities in the future. Excellent.
There's a ton of research out there that shows that, people of color, women, we were talking about, Latinas, they won't even apply unless they check all the boxes of the role. But people that are males or whatever, they'll apply. They're like, I think I can do it. Let me apply.
Right.
And so again, even that level of bias, you won't even put your name in until you feel like you're 100%. But you're competing with people that's saying, 25, that's good. I'm going to do it. And sometimes they get those roles. So. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, Francis.
I think building on the stepping out of your comfort zone to really show what you can do. When I first started at the State Department, this was around 2006, and I was in a science and tech advisory role for international affairs. And when I was going to get my placement, I had two options. I could either go into a position where I was going to work on STEM issues in collaboration with countries in the Middle East, or I could work on similar issues with Latin America. And in one, I would feel very, very comfortable and I already had the language skills. And in the other, I would start taking Arabic lessons at 7 a.m. every day, just so that when I went to the region, I could at least try to basically converse. I wasn't fluent by any means. And I picked the Middle East region work. And I went to the Middle East and collaborated on agreements with these countries on STEM education, experiential learning in the classroom for science. And it made all the difference to do something that was outside my comfort zone, gain skills, and not do what folks expected me to do. That would have been the easier path. So I really wanted to emphasize that. I think it's really important. Don't let anybody stereotype you. Don't let anybody tell you where it is that you're going to do your best work. Latinos can do anything, and we can be helpful in many careers.
Absolutely. I love this conversation, and I think we all can relate to that, and definitely put yourself out there, own your successes, build the network, not only when you need it, but throughout your career, get the exposure, and take the challenges. I love it. I want to pass the mic to the audience. I don't know if we have any questions. I want you to take on the opportunity and ask these people here. So if any one of you has a question, I think we have a mic. There we go. Over there. So just raise your hands and we'll get the mic to your position.
So while we wait for that, we actually have a few questions coming in through the
Awesome.
live Q&A on the app. This first one was submitted anonymously, so it's many spoke about on-the-job training and informal paths for individuals without college degrees. Did your organization eliminate degree requirements? Can talent get promoted despite not having a formal degree?
Excellent.
I'll
Yes,
take that.
Alex.
Yeah, so, we talked about the 8% in STEM. We talked about the overall 17% Hispanic in the market. And at United, we continually to look at the STEM market, and our goal was to continue to increase our representation. But then we started thinking, why do we just continue to look at this 8%? And so one of the things that I'm most proud of working on at United is a thing called Innovate. And so Innovate is an apprenticeship program. And essentially, we look outside of the STEM market. We look for people that have the talent, have the engagement, just have the hunger, but don't have the opportunity to actually go to a 4-year degree, but they want a career. And so we built an apprenticeship, a 2-year apprenticeship program in technology at United. We partnered with a community-based organization called IC Stars. And so IC Stars does about a 4-month boot camp. Then we bring them on at United, and they start their 2-year journey. We started actually about a year and a half ago, 2 years. We started with 2 apprentices. We have about 50 apprentices now, because we also look at partner with universities, but there's so many people outside of that 8% that have the hunger, that want that opportunity, that just want to work at a company, but unfortunately they don't have those opportunities to go to a 4-year degree. And so we went from 2 to now approximately 50. We actually gave 17 offers last week and got 17 acceptances, which is amazing, which we're super proud. And so our goal for Innovate is to actually hire 500 technologists over the next 5 years with a combination of our partnerships with universities and then also our partnerships with community-based organizations like IC Stars and P33. And so I think it's just a realization that the only market isn't just the STEM market. You can do that, but there's also an opportunity to kind of build the talent, utilize that engagement, and create opportunities and create careers for people that historically maybe wouldn't have that unless a company decides to do that. And so it's something that I'm incredibly proud of doing. It's something that will continue to grow, and something that goes, the sponsorship not just goes into our technology leadership, but it goes all the way up to our senior leadership, our most senior leadership at United.
That sounds wonderful.
We have another one through the
Okay.
app. Young people are obsessed with technology and digital media. How can we harness this enthusiasm in non-traditional methods to encourage them to pursue STEM careers?
I think it goes back to demystifying what STEM is, right? You know, how when you are, you know, this is the generation that didn't have a smartphone, right? Like, so as you look at that and we start thinking about what that means for the experience that you have in your life, how do you go back to customer obsession and meet them with where they are, whether it is, again, understanding that UX design is tech, right? Like the experience you have, what the algorithm that builds your playlist in Spotify and Amazon Music and all those is tech. Fashion is tech. Like, so going back to, again, saying like, you know, you're creating stories on our streaming services or in other spaces is tech. So when you look at those kinds of things, it's taking away what often is seen as a binary tech, non-tech to young people and really going back to integrate it into all the things and all the ways that you can essentially be whatever you want to be, whether it is an entrepreneur, whether it is somebody working in a large company, whether it is a small business owner in a different mechanism. I mean, I think that that's the strategy that we are trying to pursue to help people understand how to tap into that appetite.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know if you have any more questions.
We do. So we have many spoke about on-the-job training and informal paths for individuals without, sorry. We just answered that one. Here, there's several actually now. Are your companies working to increase access to STEM career pathways for Latinos in rural communities?
Anyone wants to take on that?
Go ahead.
So at Toyota, we have 18 states that we hire in. Now we do have some roles that are remote from a technical perspective. They're primarily like cybersecurity and data scientist roles, where we see more of those remote positions. We do have goals in terms of looking at our population and people of color, women, et cetera. We do hire for the best candidate. And so what we like to look at is making sure that we can open up a role and get the best qualified person, but we're very strategic on how and where we go, and we partner in terms of pushing out campaigns, as well as our recruiting efforts. So we go to a lot of different Hispanic events, Latino events, and even events that are not considered recruiting events, and we recruit. So we're trying to get out of the box in some of our traditional way of recruiting. We do videos on TikTok, and we talk about how cool it is to work at our center. Our corporate office is in Dallas, and it's an amazing facility. So we do show and highlight some of the cool things. We have a race car track, we have a gym with a rock wall, we have a sushi restaurant, so you name it, we have it. So we like to highlight, we have cool things at Toyota for individuals that may want to do a different career path. Most people think of Toyota as only a car company. We're no longer only a car company. We're a mobility company, and that means technology. In Japan, we've created an autonomous city. We're building it right now. And we're partnering with all types of technology companies so that we can test out a fully autonomous city. We asked team members to volunteer to move to Japan and go ahead and live in the city so that we can test it out, so that we have multi-generational team members living there, and we can see how does autonomous impact babies all the way from adults, et cetera. So we do try to recruit across the country, but you will see that there's 18 states that we're approved to work out of, and then we do have some roles that are remote as well.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. So Amazon Future Engineer, I talked about earlier, actually came from a paper written that was a big idea about reaching rural communities. And so I remember the person who wrote that working with him, and he talked about, like, started with 10 interns, right? Now we're at 400 in that. And it was about understanding that diversity, there's a lot of intersections, right? Like many of our communities thrive agriculturally, and so we live there. I think when we go back into recruiting there, we also talk about equipping people to have access to technology. And so our Kuiper satellite system, which recently launched, will bring broadband access to millions of underserved communities around the world. And so when you think about what are the barriers as somebody living in a rural community to participate in the tech economy or in careers or in all the things that we sometimes take for granted, like some of that, like going back to the gaps in the infrastructure, that's a big part of what we're really excited about with that launch.
Thank you.
We have some more questions. We talked about the importance of education and making students more aware of opportunities within STEM. In terms of investments at the federal level, what should Congress's role be in helping empower students in STEM fields at the K through 12 level?
I think Congress, right?
Yes,
Congress.
correct.
So I'll say this, I think that it's important to say that we've invested as a country a tremendous amount in STEM training through our investments in minority serving institutions, programs through our technical agencies from the Department of Defense to the Department of Energy that have also training programs directly in some of these institutions. Sometimes throwing more money at the problem is not the answer, and that number you quoted about how many Latinos overall and Latinas specifically there are in STEM, that number has inched up not as fast as we would prefer or not proportionally to the amount of investments we've made. So I think it's important to name that it isn't sometimes about getting Congress to throw or tell the agencies to throw more money at a problem. It is about sometimes addressing the real systemic barriers in the system, right? Is the government, when it gives out a grant to an institution, are we holding them accountable for the results of that? Does that program really working, and does it deserve to continue to get taxpayer money in the same way? Or do we need to really delve deeper into what the barriers are and what the problems are systemically? So I would say it is important for Congress to continue to focus on this because we need to move that number. But it is important to look at it in a thoughtful way where we are really not just throwing more money at a problem, and we are saying, how do we actually make sure that these programs and investments work and that taxpayers are really investing in moving that needle?
Back to accountability.
Accountability.
I do agree that accountability metrics are important, but there are organizations that have the intent to do right with those funds. I'll give you an example. One of the organizations that we're working with or planning to work with is an organization from Chicago called P33. And P33 has a thing called a Good Jobs Challenge that provides companies funding for training. They help subsidize some of the training for apprenticeships. And so at United, it really is the difference between bringing 10 a year to potentially 30 to 40 a year. And so that the funding does help, but as long as you have those accountability metrics and you're working with companies to make sure that they're actually doing the most optimal thing with those funds, I think that's critical as well. But definitely there are organizations that are providing huge impact to companies that wouldn't normally have that, would have that barrier of entry, but with those funds have a reduced barrier of entry.
Good, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Okay.
Hi, so as a Latina in STEM, I know that some of you mentioned various apprenticeships and fellowships that are presented to students, but I was curious as to what kind of opportunities you provide for employees that might not have a STEM background. So I know you talked about like taking a coding class even though you were a communications major. So how do you think like STEM trainings can be more normalized in the future, and how can we make STEM less intimidating for those that want to get into it?
So at Toyota, I actually helped develop a program for technology for people that are on the business side as well as in IT. What we did is we took kind of a systematic approach to it. So we looked at our architecture platforms that we use at Toyota across North America. And we said, where are we going with our platforms? Are we moving to more SaaS-based applications? Are we moving to more out-of-the-box configuration? Okay, what does that mean in terms of the type of talent we have? And then what does that mean in terms of the type of team members that we're trying to bring in? So what we did is we partnered with a number of learning path providers through our LMS system so that we had all of the integration set up. And then we targeted team members that had skills that were very close to being IT skills. And what we did is we started to do campaigns. And so we had created commercials, and we basically said, like, look at me, for example. I'm a great example of someone that started in the business and then came over to IT and has done really well, right? So to show that there are people that have taken that risk, that have put in the work. I went back to school. I did school at night to try to advance and make sure that I would be able to perform in IT. But what we did is we created a program that is very similar to going into college. So we called it like 101, 201, 301 courses, and it was certified based. And then we also opened gigs up so that they can see after they get the learning, it's not just learning, right? Because once you get the learning, if there's no position, then what's the point of doing it? If you don't use it, you're gonna lose it. So we opened up gigs so that team members could also take that. We are hiring around 900 engineers over the next 2 years in IT. We know that some of those engineers need to probably be in-house. And so we're looking at how many team members can we upskill to also come over. And even if it's 50, that would be a success to us. And then we think that the more that team members see individuals that come over to the business, then the more they'll feel like, I can do it, it's not scary. But we are having a lot of conversations through our business partnering groups where we talk about careers in STEM and other opportunities at Toyota. We do talk at Toyota that you work there for life. It's very common to see people with 20, 30 years of experience at Toyota. And so we're like, don't limit yourself to the one position that you came in at. Continue to look at other opportunities across the company, and then look at the types of skills and programs that we have in-house, and we pay for it. So we make sure that we help reimburse. We have a really good reimbursement program, and then we have internal training that Toyota pays for.
Thank you. That sounds wonderful. And we are running out of time. I feel like we have so much more to discuss. But I do want to thank all of you for the time, for the honesty, for really committing to creating a more diverse and a more inclusive environment for Latinos in STEM. And I want to invite all of you to take that momentum from this conversation and take it back to your workplace. And really, if you are in a position of power, if you have any kind of decision power, if you can influence even a coworker or a friend, just do it. Take the opportunity to go and make it a reality. I feel like together, all of us, we can really embrace Latinos in STEM, not as a slogan, but as a reality. And the more we do, the more we get. So I want to leave you with that. And thank you again, all of you, for being here. We have 2 more panels coming right now, so I don't want to take the time for that. And I want to invite you, they're called Our Virtual Live Latinos Online in America and the Techolution, the inclusion of Latinos in emerging technologies. So please join those as well, and thank you again, all of you, for being here.